Welcome to part 3 of our live training series here with our Honda K-Series engine. In this tutorial, we're going to learn how we can get our engine to fire up and run and maintain and hold a stable idle. We have a lot to cover. Let's jump in so we can check this out. Welcome back to our live training session. In this tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at how to set up and tune our startup and idle control. This is the first step in our calibration process so that we have a stable idle and the engine can start and run on its own, so we can move on to the part throttle tuning process and then move on to our wide open throttle tuning process. So in this situation, we haven't uploaded the base calibration file that we've built and created in the last 2 tutorials. I am in the online status, so I'm sitting in the vehicle, my ignition key is powered on, I am plugged in through the USB from my laptop to the link. We're now ready to go ahead and bring in our calibration file. We want to store that to the link so it's permanently stored onto the ECU board memory. And then we're going to go through and check our firmware, making sure that we have a firmware and software match. Then we'll go through a basic sensors check. We'll go and get the engine to crank, fire, and run, allow the engine to warm up. We'll review our fuel and spark timing at idle, making sure the idle control is stable. We're going to review the spark timing feedback from the idle control. And then we're also going to go through a variable cam test, making sure that the link understands what's going on within the variable cam control, so it understands the movement of that variable cam. And then finally, we're going to go through and check our timing sync with the timing light, verifying that the ignition timing we command from the link is going to be synced up to the engine. So if we command 10 degrees from our software here, we're going to see 10 degrees at the engine. So a lot of steps here that we need to go through before we move into doing any driving or full throttle tuning. Let's jump in here and take a look at how we're going to go ahead and upload that base map. Now the map that's in here, this is the map from a previous live training tutorial with this vehicle. This is not the map that we've built in our last 2 tutorials. What we need to do here is go up into File and go up into Open, and we're going to go ahead and go to our folder that we've created for our project, so the EP3 ITB K24, and grab our base cal. Now it's going to ask me, select yes to open the file and download the settings to the ECU, or no to disconnect the ECU before opening the file. In this case, we want to choose the yes option. We want to go ahead and open the file and also store that file to the ECU. So essentially we're importing or we're uploading the calibration file to the link. So we'll click yes here and give that a second. So it's going to take a second to make sure everything is going to be good. So the file's open and downloaded successfully. Do you wish to carry out a store command on the ECU? Now the store should be performed because if we turn the ignition key off, depower the link, it won't store the file that we've just uploaded or revert back to the previous file. So we want to make sure in this case we say yes. So now we've permanently stored the file to the link. We can always overwrite it at any point in time, but this allows us to make sure that we have everything set up and upload it here. Now, let's go and check our firmware and software, seeing if the firmware is up to date to match our software we have, our PC Link software that we're using here. The firmware is going to act as an in-between when the software commands a certain thing to happen, let's say a certain pulse width or certain spark timing or certain feature or function within the link. It's going to be sending that information through the firmware to the hardware, and the hardware is going to make that task happen. If the firmware and the software aren't matched up, we'll have control problems and all kinds of odd issues. So if we jump up here and let's go into ECU controls and we see update firmware, we're going to find in this case we can upgrade it. So upgrading from 6.2217 to 6.236. We want to go ahead and do that. We want to make sure the firmware is updated. So let's go here and read notes first. It's going to tell us to read the notes. That's fine. I'm not going to go through all the details. This is essentially telling us all the updates they've made and improved over the various firmware versions. And then in here, I'm going to go and just say upgrade. And have you read the firmware update notes? Yes. And then we're going to say continue with the update. Yes. Now we do not want to turn the ignition key off or interrupt this firmware updating process. So we want to be patient while it completes the firmware update. Very, very important. If you disturb the ECU, you can potentially brick the ECU, and we don't want to have to send it back into link for it to be recovered. So again, we're just going to be patient here. We can see the hasn't given me confirmation that it's completed that process. Right down here, we can see our status bar. It's going across here in the green. Should be any second now that completes the process, and then the file that we've created will be uploaded. So let's just give this one more second. Okay, so now we can see here the ECU is ready to run, so that firmware update was pretty straightforward, and we can see that we are on the latest firmware, so 623.6. Let's click close right here, and let's reconnect to the ECU now that we've went through and updated the firmware. And now what we can do is our basic sensor check, and actually Part of the basic sensor check is going to be doing the calibration of both the throttle position sensor and making sure the map and baro pressure sensors are going to be within a very small margin of each other. And we want to make sure that our map sensor, key on engine off, reflects our baro pressure reading at the elevation that we're at. We can see right here, the map pressure showing 97.6. And if we go down our list, I believe I have baro pressure pulled up on my list, and it doesn't look like I actually have it on here. The baro pressure might read slightly different. That's why we have to do the map sensor calibration when we go ahead and first upload a file to the link. So if we go up here into ECU controls, we're gonna go to our map sensor calibration. It's gonna ask me, do you wanna perform a map sensor calibration? This compares the map sensor reading, key on engine off, to our baro pressure sensor, and with as long as it's within a few, I think it's 5 kPa of the baro pressure sensor, it's gonna fix that and match the map to the baro. If it's outside of that range, it'll give us a warning and that we might have some kind of a calibration scaling problem or wiring problem with our map sensor. Let's click yes, and now we can see that's been completed. So the map and baro now are gonna be matching, key on engine off. That's especially important when we're doing an alpha end strategy. We wanna make sure that everything is in order here 100%, even though we're not using the map pressure sensor for any input to our fuel or spark timing tables. It's still important that we make sure that that is gonna be calibrated to the baro. The next thing is going to be our throttle position sensor. Right here we can see when I'm off the throttle it's showing 0, but if I go ahead and give it a little bit of throttle input right now, I'm still on the throttle, and right now it's starting to pick up. So it's actually losing probably the first maybe 5-8% of throttle travel. It's not actually picking it up. So it doesn't understand the initial voltage to 0% throttle correlation. We're gonna go through and do a throttle position rescaling right here. Regardless if you're doing an alpha end strategy or a normal map-based style strategy or MGP-based strategy, you still wanna go through this process and make sure you have dialed that in. Let's go here to ECU controls. Let's go to TPS sensor setup. Now it's gonna ask me to press the throttle all the way open. So I'm gonna go all the way to the floor. We can see it's only reading 81.7% when I'm all the way to the floor. Let's click OK. Now we can see it's gonna read 100. I'm gonna come all the way off the throttle, and it's gonna ask me to release the throttle, go to the closed position and click OK. And now it's gonna be registering and reading 0.1% throttle. That's fine. If I go here and just give it a tiny bit of throttle movement, we can see it's picking that up now. Before I was losing all of this travel, and now because we're alpha end based, we can see it's going and transitioning through our table as I'm giving it the throttle input at this particular breakpoint right here, the 0 RPM breakpoint. So this is doing exactly what it should be doing, and that's calibrated. So that looks good. Now I'm gonna go ahead and do a store. So if we go up here, we can do Control S or click Store to ECU. We're gonna store those changes that we've just updated in our calibration file. Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.